briefing of the spokesperson of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Good morning, dear colleagues. Начебто так.
Как слышно меня? Слышно, да? Отже, будемо поспішати повільно. Міністр оборони України генерал-полковник
Ukraine's Minister of Defense, Colonel General Stepan Poltorak, held a meeting with the head of delegation, director of the Department for International Security Policy of the Ministry of Defense of UK, Nick Gurr. The sides have discussed the situation and prospects of the reformation of the defense sector of Ukraine and bilateral cooperation in military and technological spheres. Colonel General Stepan Poltorak remarked that in the current very complicated situation, the armed forces of Ukraine highly evaluate the support of the world community and our reliable, long-standing partners, one of which is the United Kingdom. At the moment, the prospective directions of cooperation between defense departments of Ukraine and Great Britain is the civil-military cooperation, professional training of the representatives of the armed forces of Ukraine in training centers and educational establishments of Great Britain, and participation in joint military trainings, cooperation in military technological spheres, and also the acceptance of humanitarian and material help to provide for the needs of the units of armed forces of Ukraine that perform duties in the anti-terrorist operation zone. The Minister for Defense of Ukraine said that in Ukraine's Defense Department, they highly evaluate the work of the British advisor on the issues of management and financial management in the sphere of defense. Colonel General Stepan Poltorak emphasized that the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine pays great attention to the drafting and signing of the new memorandum on mutual understanding between the government of UK and the Cabinet of Ministers of Ukraine about the cooperation in the defense sphere. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine thanked the British government for providing Ukraine with humanitarian help, the aggregate cost of which amounts to $1,900,000 US. At the end of January this year, the British side has handed over to the armed forces of Ukraine military equipment to the tune of almost $920,000 US. The Kevlar helmets and body armor, also medical kits for armored vehicles, sleeping bands, etc. The Minister of Defense of Ukraine emphasized that at the moment, in connection to the sharp deterioration of situation in the east of Ukraine and the holding of another wave of mobilization, the armed forces of Ukraine feel the need in tactical medical sets, inflatable tents, specialized clothes for protection from water and flame, and also in modern individual means of protection. After the meeting at the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, there was a presentation of basic samples of military equipment handed over by Great Britain to the armed forces of Ukraine as humanitarian help in January 2015. The citizens of Ukraine continue to provide help to Ukrainian military who perform their duties in the anti-terrorist operation zone. Within the action help support Ukrainian army, the accounts of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine received almost 154.5 million hryvnia as help from legal and entities and individuals. With the help of phone calls to the joint mobile number 565 to support the Ukrainian army from the start of 2015, almost 420,000 hryvnia was accumulated, and all this money is aimed to material and technical provision of the armed forces of Ukraine. Private entrepreneurs in Rivne region have restored for the needs of the armed forces of Ukraine another batch of military machinery. 4 armored personnel carriers BTR-70 have already arrived to the military unit where the machine guns are being mounted on them. Out of 4 armored vehicles, 3 will be sent to the anti-terrorist operation zone, and 1 will be used for training in firing and driving. Representatives of the public organization Kirovograd Samopomich have handed over to one of the combat units of the armed forces of Ukraine UAZ car that they repaired and re-equipped to meet the needs of Ukrainian military. After additional armor will be installed, the car will be used for combat action for combat tasks in the zone of the anti-terrorist operation. Besides, residents of Kirovograd region have delivered 2 tons of humanitarian cargo to the fighters of one of motorized infantry battalions of the armed forces of Ukraine that performed their combat duties in the vicinity of Debaltseve. And also there was a batch of help from the educational complex number 2, Kirovograd region. And now I pass the word to Lieutenant Colonel Anatoliy Stelmakh, who is the officer of the press center of the headquarters of anti-terrorist operation. The night in the zone of anti-terrorist operation from 10th to 11th of February is characterized with the increase of assaults and storming of Ukrainian positions. Twice, or at around 10 and 12 p.m., 10 p.m. and 12 a.m. yesterday, the terrorists tried to attack army units next to the settlement Novogrigorivka, and there was also a clash with the enemy next to Debaltseve. After the response from the Ukrainian military, the criminals have retreated with significant losses. The enemy also was active in Mariupol sector. They have shelled from Grad batteries settlements Myrne and Novoselivka. Traditionally, the hottest spot in the east of Ukraine is the city of Debaltsevo and the adjacent settlements. Overnight, the enemy have 18 times shelled and fired at Ukrainian positions in this direction. Novogrigorivka and Popasna suffered most. The city of Debaltsevo has already become a certain symbol of heroic opposition, and the bandits are shelling the city round the clock. The city infrastructure is being ruined. However, despite this, the Ukrainian military are courageously holding to their positions and don't expect to leave them. Don't want to leave them. In general, overnight, the illegal armed formations have 35 times shelled and fired at Ukrainian position. Over the 24 hours, the illegal armed formations have 87 times shelled Ukrainian positions and fired at them. The general number of settlements and populated centers that were shelled and fired at amounts to 30. As a result, the Ukrainian armed forces have lost 7 military personnel and 13 military were killed. As of today, 559 Ukrainian military are in hospitals and 28 of them are badly wounded. Any questions? Azat Safarov, Fifth Channel. The information about the highway Artemysk-Debaltsevo, Mr. Timchuk has written that there is a breakthrough there. Is, by the way, glad to meet you, Azad. In reality, the situation on the highway Debaltsevo-Artemysk remains complicated. The forces of the anti-terrorist operation are conducting measures aimed at blocking and liquidating the gunmen in this sector, and the situation remains complicated. Reinforcements are being sent there to conduct special measures aimed at blocking and destroying the gunmen. Thank you, Vladyslav. Thank you, Anatoly. Take care. Talk to you tomorrow, 9 a.m. Our next briefing is at 10. We'll hear from the Press Secretary of the State